pace. So admittedly, there's going to be a degree of guesswork there. But when you've got an environment when there's more people in their 70s than children, and more people in their 60s than children, and 50s than children, you get the idea. This is just catastrophic. And that assumes that the new Chinese data is accurate and not just another.
Because obviously it's definitely not very trustworthy on the surface, right?
You don't lie to make it look like you're dying. You lie to make yourself look better, which makes me wonder what the reality really is. So
given their political system and compounded by various like the supply chain and market issues, what's the prognosis for China in the next 5, maybe 10 years?
We've never had a country die for demographic reasons. It's just never happened because we've never, remember, this started with industrialization and urbanization. That is, historically speaking, a relatively recent development. But what we do know is that when you run out of people who are age 20 and under, you actually get faster growth for a while because all the money you used to spend on your children, you're spending on consumption and investment. And then when you run out of people aged 40 and under, you then start seeing the explosion in labor costs. And China has now been in that environment for 20 years. So the cost of labor in China has gone up by a factor of almost 15 since the year 2000, which again, historically unprecedented. We're now in an environment where there is not a single manufacturing subsector where China is competitive. They have the advantage of the sunk industrial plant and obviously a robust subsidy system. But in a head-to-head competition with anyone, unless those subsidies get really out of control, the Chinese lose on both quality and speed. This is only going to get worse because now we're in an environment where they're running out of people age 50 and under. And that means it's eating into their skilled labor as well.
So it's kind of like the walls closing in from both sides, because you've also got these foreign investment is slowly draining out, which is keeping their manufacturing afloat, right? So not only
depends on the manufacturing. Manufacturing in China is such a weird thing. They don't actually build a whole lot. They assemble a great number of things, and I don't mean to suggest that that's nothing. But the sort of skilled labor that is required to push the envelope technologically, they just don't have. They've got a handful of very brilliant people, but you need more than one Aristotle, and Aristotle has to have a team of interns to hand it off to it to just overuse the analogy. And the Chinese don't. You've got a vast swath of people with relatively low skill, nothing in the middle, and then a handful of people at the very top. That is not what allows a system to develop.
You've emphasized that communication between agencies and industry in China is a real big problem, right? They're not there's not enough creative thinking outside of the box, and that everyone is kind of worried about what their supervisor or their supervisor is going to say, right?
Oh, certainly, and other people talk about that better than me. I would argue that they're having a hard time thinking inside the box now.
Okay.
Part of the whole rise of the cult of Xi Jinping is that there just isn't communication at all, because no one wants anything that they say, good or bad, to filter up to the big guy, because they don't know how he's going to react. And I think the spy balloon thing that the United States has recently dealt with, the disconnect between the intelligence operation that was involved and the foreign ministry that had to then deal with the fallout, it was very clear that the foreign ministry had absolutely no idea what was going on. And we have seen things like this happen in diplomatic relations between the Chinese and the rest of the world over and over and over for the last 3 years. Just there is no coordination. There is no equivalent of the National Economic Council or the National Security Council. And that means it's just one dude making decisions in a vacuum, and that's leading to catastrophic policy outcomes.
Okay, if I can, I'd like to move on to the broader region. So countries like Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, which we'll hopefully get to more in depth, they're also facing demographic problems. But how is their situation similar or different to that of China?
Well, let's start with the most extreme case and the most similar to China, and that would be Korea.
Okay.
The Koreans only started their industrialization process really after the Korean War ended in the mid-50s, and really didn't didn't start down the path towards the Korea that we know until the 60s. So in many ways, the Koreans followed what the Chinese have now done, just with a 20-year head start, and it shows in their demographics. They're much older. Demographically speaking, they may have a very, very long lifespan, and that's great. But they stopped having kids in numbers 50 years ago. So the decline there is extreme. Now, they're only now, in this decade, hitting that mass retirement point, and it's such a smooth slide from the 70s down to the children that this has been a golden age for the Koreans because they've had all kinds of people who are above age 40 but younger than 65. And that means that they're some of the most highly skilled workers in the world, but there's no one to carry the torch for them moving forward. Now, under normal circumstances, I would say that this would be the end of Korea as a nation, but the Koreans have shown from time to time over the last 75 years that they can ignore the laws of physics to get things done. So I don't want to condemn them. If anyone can come up with a super secret backstage plan to make this work, it's going to be them, and I hope they're kind enough to share it with the rest of us, but I don't see how it works.
Okay.
Japan began aging a lot sooner. But Japan, because they started aging before the turn of the previous century, has had a lot of time to culturally adapt to this adjustment. So yes, demographically, they are the world's oldest country, but they are no longer the world's fastest aging one. They've taken a number of steps to encourage people to have kids. They've made it easier to move into the countryside or the smaller towns. They've generally made life a little bit easier in the workplace on women as well. And they have adjusted their entire manufacturing and investment strategies to relocate the sort of jobs that really take people away from family time to other countries. I mean, they did this for multiple reasons, the whole reshoring trend.
Do you think the drive towards automation in Japan is
automation is part of that, but the Japanese really have moved a lot of their productive capacity elsewhere. Toyota's mantra is build where you sell. And in doing that, they've made alliances with countries with healthier demographic structures, which has allowed their people a little bit more flexibility. And so actually, among the Northeast Asian 4 countries, Japan has by far the highest birth rate now. They're still aging. This is still a problem that will have to be dealt with over the decades to come. But they're no longer the first country that's going to get there. That's Korea.
So do you think Japan has done the best job of making efforts to mitigate these demographic problems?
Globally, yes.
Globally, okay.